Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Yesterday on the show, we left you with a clip. As much as it pains me to hear her voice again, I'm certain we'll be hearing a lot more from Hillary Rodham Clinton, not just over the next few months and as the campaign rolls on, but afterwards too. Regardless of how the election goes, the Hillary Clinton machine will be working behind the scenes. She's admitted as much herself. Her former campaign manager, John Podesta, her director of communications, Jennifer Palmieri, her policy advisors like Jake Sullivan are all active right now, working not to elect Joe Biden, as you might assume Democratic operatives are all doing at the moment, but rather the Clinton machine is hard at work trying to undermine the results of the upcoming presidential election, and they'll spare no expense. Clinton was interviewed by her own comm staffer, Palmieri, for The Circus, a lightweight political show on the Showtime network. During the interview, Clinton made a pretty stunning and chilling remark. It was about accepting the results of the 2020 election. Advice to Joe Biden? Don't do it. Don't accept the result. Don't continue the centuries-long American political tradition of a peaceful transition to or back to power. Throw the rule book out the window, throw the nation into disarray, weaken America, weaken its political system, call into question the institutions such as the Electoral College that have held mob rule at bay throughout the nation's history. Directly assault the U.S. Constitution and the will of the people. Let's remind ourselves of what Mrs. Clinton, the former Secretary of State, said. Let's roll that clip.
Legal operation, and I know the Biden campaign is working on that. We have to have poll workers, and I urge people who are able to be a poll worker. We have to have our own teams of people to counter the force of intimidation that the Republicans and Trump are going to put outside polling places. This is a big organizational challenge, but at least we know more about what they're going to do. And, you know, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch and if we are as focused and relentless as the other side is.
These are her words. Do not concede under any circumstances. Team Clinton is fighting a surreptitious grudge match against Donald Trump, and they intend to assault the traditions of this nation to do so. Antifa and their allies are closely on hand to help them, and I'll get into that in a second. But Clinton's modus operandi here is plain for all to see, as the U.S. foreign policy establishment has waged war on elected leaders and democratic legitimacy around the world, like they did in Ukraine. They now intend to do the same thing here in the United States. A color revolution for America. Except this time the administration isn't a dictatorship, it isn't illegitimate, and there won't be any proof of ballot box tampering or opponent intimidation, not from the Republican side at least. Nonetheless, the Democratic Party of America is conspiring to reject the election results and throw this country into a kind of chaos that will make Portland look like a playpen. They're warming up already from the Chaz Zone to Kenosha, Wisconsin. We can see the tactics they intend to use. Why do we see the scenes we see outside federal courthouses every night? Because those same iconic courthouses up and down the country, those are where the decisions over ballots and election victories will be taken. Democrats are hoping to show the world that President Trump is a dictator who refuses to be removed from power, even if he wins. They'll air images from around the courthouses of America, and they'll liken it to scenes from Hong Kong or Belarus. Why do you think they're showing you all those scenes from Belarus right now? To tee up a coup, or should I say, another coup. And it isn't just Clinton who said the quiet part out loud. Her campaign chief, John Podesta, played Joe Biden in a recent war game hosted by the Open Society Foundations and the Berggruen Institute. We'll get into that in the final segment on today's show with our senior reporter at the National Pulse, Natalie Winters. They billed that war game as bipartisan, but the only people from the Republican side were never Trumpers, like Bill Kristol and Michael Steele, who will lend credibility to the idea that Trump should be removed regardless of who wins the election fairly. Between the mail-in ballots, the pandemic shutdowns, the riots, and now this open refusal to accept the results under any circumstances, Democrats are setting up America for a civil war. No wonder they wanted the police neutered and defunded so quickly. They want lawlessness. They want carnage. They want America to be turned into a socialist banana republic, because then and only then can the left force Donald Trump from power and impose totalitarian measures upon the public. Measures like taking your guns away. Look at how they treated Mark and Patricia McCloskey, and look how the media lies about them and what happened to them to this very day. Meanwhile, people who vote Democrat all around the country appear to be waking up to the new tyranny of the left. I want to play you some call-in clips from C-SPAN last night of Democrats who watched the Republican National Convention on day 2 and what they had to say as a result of it. Let's roll these clips.
I'm a Democrat, and our convention last week is no comparison to what I've seen in just the last 2 nights.
What do you mean?
I'm from Minnesota, where all these riots and looting and the burning started, and I mean, not a mention about us last week, about saving our communities, helping our homeless, rebuilding our businesses. And this convention, just in the last 2 nights, has awakened me that there is hope, that there are people that are willing to fight for us people in our communities.
Barb, are you in the Twin Cities area or outside?
In the Twin Cities.
And
right outside the Twin Cities.
Has some of the protests, have they frightened you?
Oh, absolutely. They've been, 7 miles away with a new John Johnson of our party going into a neighborhood with 200 of Black Lives Matter supporters and terrorizing innocent neighbors in a community. It is scary.
What did you think of Melania Trump's speech?
I thought it was wonderful. I come from a long line of Democrats, but I have to say I switched parties because I'm so impressed by what our president did. And tonight's, the whole RNC was wonderful. I think Democrats really have to take a look at what has happened to them, how they switched their focus, how they don't stand up for what the American people really stand for. And Melania and everyone who spoke tonight were just excellent. They spoke what the real true Americans are.
Helen, who did you vote for in 2016?
Well, I didn't vote for Trump, but I am now, most definitely. The riots that's going on, what's happening in California and all these countries, all these states and cities, it's just, is that what we really want? I don't think so. It's amazing how the Democratic Party has changed, and the Republican Party and Donald Trump is the one who's going to take this country and make it better, like he said. And I'm just so impressed.
Tonight, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm from Lorain, Ohio, which is a Democrat city in Ohio. And I just want to say, after watching the convention tonight on TV, on C-SPAN here, I am definitely changing my vote to Republican. And I'll tell you what, they just put the Democratic Party or the Republican Party to shame. I'm going to follow the Republican Party now.
But why? What was it that convinced you about tonight?
It was the heartfelt way they came across to the American people, and I was really touched by the number of times they used the word God. They put God into everything, and the people on the Democratic side on their convention act like they were pushing God right out of it. And that had a lot to do with changing my mind.
Incredible. And there you have it, or at least some of it. I know there's a lot to play there, but I wanted to bring you all of that. There are even more. But it's not enough to rely on some Democrats to wake up in time for November to flip their votes. Republicans need to get their heads around this nightmare scenario that's unfolding right now. Biden, Clinton, and the gang will march the Open Society Foundation's experts in front of Congress one day after the election, and they'll refuse to accept the result. They'll say, these are the election experts. They know what they're talking about. They'll claim every victimhood status under the sun, and they'll lie, cheat, and steal to drag the process on beyond Inauguration Day. Because if they do, they know it'll come down to one thing: whether or not the Republican establishment wants to fight to the death for the White House. And given how some of the Republicans in Washington, D.C. operate, do you really trust them to stick it out alongside this president? I don't. On today's show, we have Jérôme Rivière. He's a member of the European Parliament from France, and he'll be telling us about the assaults on the will of the people from the political establishment over in Europe, and how he's seen so much of the violence in America before. This is the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. We want to make sure that you're all heading over to thenationalpulse.com, subscribing to all of our social media pages and channels. Our YouTube is back up as well, so you can get all the best clips from this show if you subscribe to that YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/thenationalpulse. For the most of this show, my guest is going to be Jérôme Rivière, a man I've known for some years now, member of the European Parliament from France. And you might wonder why there's a British accent and a French accent speaking on a channel called America's Voice. That's because a lot of what America is seeing right now and going through right now are things that we Europeans, I suppose I'm not supposed to refer to myself as a European anymore following the Brexit vote, but we Europeans have been living for a long time. Jérôme, thank you so much for joining us here at America's Voice for the National Pulse.
Thank you, Raheem, for having me here.
Jérôme, we're pretty short on time in this segment here because I went long with my monologue because I love the sound of my own voice very clearly. But I just want you to explain for people, you're a relatively new member of the European Parliament, relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of the European Parliament, in the grand scheme of how long I've known you. I want to get this topic out of the way first before we move on to the riots, the RNC and beyond. I mentioned Brexit there. What does Brexit portend for you guys? Because we're on the other side of the English Channel, even though you keep sending people over to us. We're on the other side of the English Channel. We're considering ourselves out. Does it have relevance for France and for the EU?
Yes, of course. As you know, the fight for Brexit was the first domino, and the first domino that led, I believe, to President Trump being elected 4 years ago. And in France, the Rassemblement National, national rally that is chaired by Marine Le Pen, who was the runner-up in the last presidential election, we hope to be another domino in this puzzle, in this vast movement, of people taking over the nations, about populists being able to say, look, we are in charge of our countries because we love it. The big thing is between a negative message from the globalists. The globalists are always using the guilt. They are always telling the people, look, if things are not going the right way, it's because you did that in the past, or because you are doing this wrong, or because you are not wearing your mask, or whatever reason, they play with the guilt. The nationalists, the populists that Trump is in the United States, that we are in France, we play on pride. We play on being proud of our country, our nations, and finding solutions.
Patriotism, in other words.
Patriotism, exactly.
The thing that a lot of the mainstream media makes Americans feel guilty about on a day-to-day basis, and I talked about that in the opening segment as it pertained to Mark and Patricia McCloskey, and it's happening all around the nation at the moment. As you go into this election, they don't want you to feel good about the vote you're casting, especially if it's for President Trump. We'll be back with more Jérôme Rivière, Raheem Kassam, The National Pulse, in a second. We've got a whole studio audience in the America's Voice studios here today. I wish I could turn the cameras around on them and show you what I can see, those beautiful faces. I want to get back to our guest here this afternoon is Jerome Riviere, member of the European Parliament. Jerome, thank you so much for being here with us today. We heard about the relevance that the UK leaving the European Union still has, and the domino effect that you hope will play out. Is the election, it's 2022 in France?
Yeah, the presidential election is in May 2022, and most likely it will be a repeat of the previous election with Macron and Marine Le Pen, and I hope Marine will come first during this election. Repeat. Not an exact repeat, but now in France it used to be the left versus the right. Right now it's a change of paradigm, and it is the globalists that are incarnated here by the Democrats versus the patriots, the populists that represent the small people, the normal person. I feel that I belong to this French population that works hard and wants, in the end of the day, to be properly represented. So globalists, they love immigration, they love mass migration, they leave the country to violence. This summer was a terrible summer in France. We have had basically on a daily basis a murder, some people that were killed by violence. We used to be a very peaceful country. It is not anymore, and this is due to Macron. When we were in the final moments of the election in France in 2017, people were saying, the journalists, the mainstream media, they were saying, with Marine Le Pen, it's going to be chaos. What we have been witnessing is that chaos came with Emmanuel Macron. The globalist program funded by the Open Society of Soros is hoping that chaos will dismantle, disrupt state. It will dismantle, disrupt law and order. Why? Because it's a huge financial opportunity. Cheap labor coming in and humongous profit being made, not the way capitalists should do. I'm full in favor of capitalism, you know. You put your money down, you make it work, you win big, but you lose big. We are not in capitalism anymore. We are in some kind of financial institution that get bailed out by the people's money. So yes, definitely May 2022 is going to be a great moment for the French nation.
I just want to make sure, in case the audience isn't familiar with the last one and the figures here, Emmanuel Macron is the sort of billed as this centrist, moderate candidate, and Marine Le Pen was sort of billed as this nationalist, nasty, far-right figure, right? That was what the mainstream media in France wanted the image of the last election to be and want people to understand. But that's, I mean, I've met Marine Le Pen, I've worked with you guys and around you guys. I've come to Paris and to Nice and to other places in France with you guys and seen, and all I can see is the parallels between the deplorables, what's called the deplorables here in the United States, and ordinary working class people in France who are sick of the centrism, sick of the globalism, sick of the mass migration, sick of the endless welfarist programs that don't look after the French, but look after newcomers to France almost as a priority. Is there a word for deplorables in France? What do you call your base?
We don't have a word like deplorable. We must thank Hillary Clinton for coining such a term, because I think we are all proud to be deplorables and to show how much these people, in French we call them bobo, bourgeois bohème. You know, these are the people that are the winner of the globalization. They can buy a ticket and go for one weekend somewhere with an airlines and travel and enjoy the fact that it's easy to travel from one country to the other. The reality of the common man is that it is still expensive to travel. They need to fight for their job. You have to understand that in France the level of unemployment is above two-digit figures, so it is really high, and people are scared for their job. So they are the losers of the globalization. The people that are from somewhere right now in Europe are losers to globalization, and this is what Brexit represented. It's the people from the United Kingdom saying, look, going with European Union, we keep on losing job, we keep on losing wealth. They were losing everything, and they said,
national
stop.
National pride and dignity and sovereignty, critical things that were important. And I want to make sure that we cover this, because some of the things that Jerome has seen and that the French have seen, that the British have seen over the last couple of years are the things that are starting to come to America now. Jerome, when you're looking at the violence on the streets, we've got a couple of minutes left in this segment and we'll come back to it afterwards. But I want to tease this from you a little bit here as well. It helps people stay over the break. I want to talk about this violence that we're seeing on American streets because, there are some things that are such tragedies that you can't help but just laugh at how crazy these things have become. But then you realize last night in Kenosha, Wisconsin, people died on the streets as a result of the lawlessness. Another Democrat-run city in the United States that has fallen, that has succumbed to total lawlessness. But you've seen this all before, right?
We have seen that, but Raheem, I wanted to mention what you said in your introduction segment, talking about Hillary Clinton, saying that she will not respect the result of an election. To us in Europe, I mean, even in France, in the United Kingdom, America for 200 centuries has been some kind of beacon of democracy. It was what a good democracy should be. I don't know if you remember Alexis Tocqueville in his book Democracy in America explained some of the dangers, but was shining the light on how it's a new system that should be fair. And what we're witnessing is the fact that, in fact, from within, the Democrats are trying to corrupt the democratic system in America. And this is really scary because it has such an impact on the rest of the world.
What do you think when you hear Hillary Clinton say, do not concede whatever the circumstances?
I hear someone that does not respect the people anymore, but it is just in phase with what she called the people voting for Trump deplorables. It's the same thing. She has disdain for the common person. She believes that she should be entitled to rule, or her class should be entitled to rule the people because they know better. It's a little bit like the Taliban, They believe that they knew better and they wanted to rule the people whether they liked it or not. It's the same thing here. She believes she knows better and she should be entitled to be ruling the country.
And Emmanuel Macron is very much cut from the same cloth.
It is the exact same thing. Same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say the male Hillary Clinton, but actually Hillary Clinton is probably more masculine than Emmanuel Macron. When we come back, I want to talk to Jerome about the violence that's playing out on the streets all across the United States. I think 2 dead was the latest count in Kenosha last night, 1 severely injured, and somebody just before we came to air this afternoon has been arrested and is being held presumably on charges for some of the violence that took place last night. The mainstream media, of course, quick to jump on it, say it was white supremacists who did it. But a lot of the footage that we're seeing from real reporters who were on the ground doesn't show anything like that at all. We'll come back with Jerome Riviere, member of the European Parliament, and Raheem Kassam after this break. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. I want to implore you all, head on over to thenationalpulse.com/support if you like our work, if you like our investigations. If you like Natalie Winters, then make sure you're supporting our work, supporting her work, and making sure we can do more to put the spotlight on what is clearly going to be a new nullification project by the Clinton camp following Joe Biden's defeat. There, I made a prediction in November. And why do I say that? Why do I think that? Well, look at what the response has been after the second day of the Republican National Convention. Democrats calling in en masse to C-SPAN to say, I saw what I saw last week at the DNC, and I saw what I saw this week at the RNC. And you know what? I'm voting Republican now. And that is going to go far and wide. You're going to start seeing this more and more. Even though the media will continue to try to suppress it, we here on America's Voice and at the National Pulse will bring you the real news all the time, and that's our pledge to you. We're also going to bring you real guests, great guests. Guests like Jerome Riviere, member of the European Parliament, a very busy man who's taken time out of his schedule to come here to Washington, D.C. to sit with us today, and we're very grateful for it, Jerome. You were sort of looking at me there like I was going to make a joke.
No, it's it's always a great pleasure to listen to you and to have a conversation with you. It is such an important issue, this presidential election, As a French citizen and elected member of the European Parliament, I should have some, it's not my direct election, but the impact on the world of the US presidency is such that we cannot ignore it. And looking at the Democratic Convention, I didn't spend my days looking at it, but I looked at some of it, Joe Biden's acceptance speech, and looking at the Republican National Convention for the past 2 days, you can see such a huge difference. The Democratic Convention seemed like a stage with actors delivering specific lines, trying to give to the American people a specific speech. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, the Republican Convention was all about authenticity. It was quite interesting to see how it's more about normal people telling the American people about their fears, their worries, their pride, what they are hoping for the United States. And it is a breath of fresh air, and I think this was quite enjoyable to see. I really think it's too bad that it is not possible due to this pandemic to have a moment of togetherness, because it would have brought even more traction to the Trump candidacy, because it felt authentic, with people deciding that they are going to vote because they want to. And the witness or the testimony of Democrats calling in C-SPAN are quite vocal, and you can tell that these people were touched, but was said, you're not touched by a movie, and the stars that were coming at the Democratic National Convention were delivering something. It's a prop. And it was not that good. So in the end, I think that the two conventions will make quite a difference.
Yeah, really low production values at the DNC, which is curious, given that they're supposed to be the party of the creatives and the Hollywood types and the producers and the film types. And by the way, I don't want you to downplay, in a sense, you have a stake in the United States, right? You have familial links to the United States, so you would be watching this relatively closely anyway, right?
Yes, I do. But as a French politician, I would resent some foreigner coming me and telling me what to do in my country. So I do respect. Exactly. So no, but I think one has to respect, because we're patriots, we're populists. I have to respect the fact that it's up to the American people, and whatever their decision will be, we have no say in it.
Right.
But as we are in a world that has a lot of interaction, I feel that I need to tell the American people that what they are doing has a direct impact all over the world, and it has an impact in France. And what has been done for the past 4 years had a very positive impact. I know it's not what the EU wants, but I'm fighting the EU. It was Trump has been fighting the globalist agenda, which is again was disruptive to states. For example, right now we have an issue with social media. Social media is in the hand of a couple of companies, corporations, and they decide and they do whatever they want. Whoever they want to ban from the network, they ban from the network. Last night in France, we have a union of policemen. The largest union was banned for Twitter because they reported a crime. On what basis? Without any possibility for the union to say, look, what is on what ground, and can we have a debate on
right,
what
no appeal?
No appeal, nothing. So this and President Trump has been stating quite clearly that he doesn't want that. That has to be a fair game, and it is not. So if we were to have a democratic victory, I am afraid that we would go into more globalism, with the hidden agenda of disrupting the states, having more migrants. And in Europe, you have to, and you know that better than others, but there is also the problem of the religious migrant. And we have a problem with Islamism, radical Islam, that is spreading very, very quick in Europe. And the alliance of the communists or extreme left and radical Islam is disrupting Europe, France specifically, and I hope for my country that President Trump is re-elected in 2 months from now.
Is that where a lot of this violence comes from? Because as you say, I know something about it. I wrote a book in 2017 about the no-go zones across Europe. I went to a lot of these migrant suburbs, and it was around the time when I was doing the research for this book, was around the time you were seeing a lot of neighborhoods, especially in France, but elsewhere on the continent as well, burning. Cars burning, buses burning, police being attacked. We've got about 90 seconds here, but I do want to get onto this violence topic. I know we skipped it in the last segment. I do want to get onto this topic of violence. What we're seeing in American streets, do you think that a lot of these Antifa tactics, we know it's an old European organization, Antifa, are a lot of these Antifa-style tactics being imported from Europe?
I believe so. I believe it is, if we look back at our history, it's something that was created with the communist takeover of Russia when USSR began. Trotsky, a famous communist leader, wrote a book about terrorism and communism, explaining how terrorism, violence should be used in politics. So this is what the extreme left has been doing in Europe, and this is what they are bringing here. You are not used to it, but you have to face the fact that it is a fact. The extreme left believes that being violent is something acceptable in politics. We believe as Democrats that this is not possible, and we have to fight back.
Yeah, well, as I say, as you say, we don't want to interfere in how American citizens cast their votes. That'll be up to them. But I do want to get your take in the next segment about how President Trump has responded to this violence so far. We'll be back in just a moment with Jerome Riviere, member of the European Parliament, a good friend of mine, here on the National Pulse on America's Voice. I'm Raheem Kassam, thenationalpulse.com. We'll be right back. Well, once upon a time, a friend of mine who works for a pretty establishment news outlet, he said to me, you're all over the world. You go to France and you go to Hungary and you go to America and you do all these things with all these different populist and nationalist political parties. Does that make you a global nationalist? I said, I'll wear that. I'll wear that as a badge of honor. And it is important, I think, that we learn the lessons from each other all around the world. The populist and nationalist groups that have come together at the same time. Our struggles have dovetailed all around the world, whether it's in Brazil, whether it's with Brexit, whether it's in France in 2022. Or whether it's right here in the United States with the re-election of President Donald J. Trump. I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from each other. My guest here is Jerome Riviere, member of the European Parliament from France. Delighted to have you in studio today, Jerome. Tell us, what lessons can President Trump learn, or what should he be learning, or what different should he be doing in terms of the violence, the riots, and the clear stitch-up? You see what's happening with Hillary Clinton. You see what's happening with John Podesta. They are going to try and steal the election, or at least delay who is announced as the next president of the United States. So what do you think we're missing here?
I don't think you are missing much. I think that his call for reestablishing a law and order is what any normal citizen is expecting. It is baffling to see that some people want to defund the police. Who, besides people that fear the police, wants to defund the police?
And who fears the police?
And who, besides criminals, or besides people that want to attack the state. So he has to be extremely strong on the fact that this is not something that will happen as he's president of the United States. I understand that because of the federal system that is the United States versus in France, for example, where we don't have a federal system, the French president, in fact, has a lot more power inside France than the American president, because he has to deal with governors. And I have been reading his appeal, his calls to governors and mayors, telling them, look, the federal government is there to help you if you need. And it is interesting to see, and it has to be pointed out, that these people that are all of them Democrats, they don't want any help because they want disruption. They like the violence. They seem to be enjoying that.
Shouldn't President Trump, shouldn't the Republican Party be doing some things differently, instead of just sort of tweeting about law and order, enacting law and order, and instead of just talking about how the mail-in ballots are going to be used and abused by the left? I mean, shouldn't we already have voter identification in the United States?
Oh, we should. This is something that is very surprising. As a French citizen, the first time I visited a voting polling station, I was baffled by the fact that you don't need to show your proof of identity, which means anybody can vote. It is just on good faith that you trust that the person who is going to vote is really who is. And I don't think it is a good system.
Or is even eligible to vote.
Oh yeah, a good system, a fair system, is the fact that you have a right, but then if you have a right, you have to show that you have this specific right. Voting by proxy is the same thing. In France, it is allowed. You can vote by proxy, but you have to go in person to a police station or to your city hall to say, I want this citizen who also has the right to vote for me. And now I hear this story about being able to cast your vote via the mail. It opens it's Pandora's box. Anything can come out. It is even something that triggers the temptation to cheat. Why wouldn't you cheat? Why wouldn't you be tempted to make the odds in your favor if it is so easy? So I think a democratic system has to be done in a way where there is check and balance. And here they are forgetting the checks, definitely.
We've definitely seen that in the United Kingdom. We had mass postal vote, mail-in vote fraud over years and years in the United Kingdom. There's no secret, and now it's coming here. But let me be clear about something. It's intentional, right, by the left. The push is intentional. I mean, to create a system that can be more easily defrauded.
Yeah, and there is an answer that the Republican could do is they should give free identification to citizens. It should not cost a dime to be able to have an identification paper. And I think this is an issue that has to be raised.
If the state requires it, then...
So they should do that. They should right away give some kind of identification that is state recognized, so that you can go and prove who you are at any time.
Yeah.
And this is
where... The problem is then you'll have Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates wanting to put your biometric identification in everything and be able to track whether you've had a coronavirus vaccine. They'll always be pushing. I want to get us on to the next topic. We've got only 2 minutes here, Jerome. Excuse me for interrupting, but I know the situation with Turkey in the Mediterranean and NATO is very close to your heart, very close to your nation. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, it's a terrible push by Turkey. Erdogan, who is the president of Turkey right now, is trying to make a push to enact a caliphate. And is extremely aggressive towards the European Union, and the European Union, because it's a European Union, is unable to react properly, because we have so many Turks living in Germany, for example. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, is unable to react to military pressure that Turkey is doing in the Mediterranean Sea. Right now we are at the brink of an armed conflict. A couple of weeks ago, a Turkish boat was aiming a French boat, lighting the French boat, which is an act of war under any circumstances. We did not react. Macron tried to play it down, but I think it is a huge issue. And to be very honest, right now Turkey is a member of NATO. France is a member of NATO. I don't want, Marine Le Pen doesn't want anymore to be under NATO command. I think it is important to be part of NATO, but we don't want to be under the unified military rule of NATO. And I think it is in the best interest of the United States to clarify this position with Turkey. How can we be aligned with such people?
You don't want French troops having to answer to a foreign general in the same way that people wouldn't want American troops answering to a foreign general. Just answer me this very quickly before we go to break and before we have to leave. You, unfortunately, Jerome Riviere, will make sure that all the audiences following you on social media will put that all up on the National Pulse and the National Pulse social media channels too. But answer me this, because I wrote in 2015 that Turkey should be kicked out of NATO. Do you believe that's right?
I believe that's right, definitely. NATO is an alliance, so you have to be with allies. They're threatening us militarily. They have nothing to do with us. Right. And right now, he has a specific idea. He has expressed it many times. He wants to establish a caliphate. Right. So it is really an invasive policy that he has towards the nation of European.
Jerome Riviere, thank you so much for joining us
Raheem, for having me
today. We're really grateful. Yeah, Turkey. If you Google Turkey NATO at Breitbart, back when I was at Breitbart, you can find my article from back then. Every single thing remains true to this day. Turkey has no place in NATO, close to China and Iran. We'll be back with more National Pulse in just a second. Well, in the opening of the show, I told you about the Berggruen Institute, the Open Society Foundations, and this war game that they put together, where John Podesta played Joe Biden and said, no, we won't accept defeat, just like Hillary Clinton told him to do yesterday. Don't accept defeat. Challenge it in the courts, challenge it in the Congress, challenge it in the Senate, challenge it with the US military. The Hillary Clinton campaign is clearly back. And back with a vengeance, backed again by George Soros. Natalie Winters is here with us to explain it all. Natalie, whenever we talk about George Soros, the political left, oh, they're anti-Semites, they're conspiracy theorists. Even though George Soros hates Israel, he doesn't class himself as Jewish, he classes himself as an atheist, he's rejected Judaism and his race. So let's just park that for a second, because I'm so sick and tired of having to deal with that. George Soros is behind this war game that shows us what the Democrats' plan is, to reject the result of the election on the early hours of November the 4th. Who's behind this?
Well, exactly. The question on everyone's mind right now is, come election night, who is going to win? And as of now, we've seen discourse focus really on the lead up to November 3rd campaigns, who's going to win, who's going to see the highest voter turnout. But that fundamentally misplaces the focus of where the election is going to be decided. It'll be the days that follow. Specifically, you've seen people like coming from the Clinton cabal, specifically groups like the Transition Integrity Project, who are keen on manipulating the outcomes of the election. So to dig down into this group, which bills itself as a bipartisan, really a bulwark against President Trump if he should forego conceding the election, they say that their fundamental goal is to step in and ensure a Biden victory. But to call this group bipartisan, which they frequently do, they've been touted by a host of establishment media organizations, is a complete and utter sham. Specifically, they've had individuals such as John Podesta, who, as we know, chaired Hillary Clinton's campaign. Notorious never-Trumper Michael Steele is also a part of it, and even Donna Brazile, who leaked questions to Hillary Clinton during the presidential debate.
This all sounds really fair.
Very,
Balanced.
very fair, totally balanced. And what's funny is they actually tout themselves as being bipartisan, saying, oh, well, look at us, we have Republicans on our board and participating in these war games. But they've yet to identify an actual Trump-supporting Republican as part of the group.
So just tell us, who is leading this thing? What are the people's names? And what is the Berggruen Institute, and how are they tied to your favorite topic, the Chinese Communist Party? Because they are. When I first saw this story, it's everything all in one place.
Yes, so the Transition Integrity Project was founded by Rosa Brooks and Nils Gilman. The former represents the globalist faction that is keen on undermining President Trump, and the latter is linked to, like you said, the Chinese Communist Party, really puppet, the Berggruen Institute. So Rosa Brooks, not only did she serve in both the Clinton and Obama administrations, but she actually was chief counsel to George Soros and now sits on the board of the Open Society Foundation. And interestingly enough, just 10 days after President Trump was inaugurated, she penned an article entitled, quote, 3 ways to get rid of President Trump before 2020, even floating a military coup, floating impeachment, well before we ever saw an actual impeachment attempt occur. Actually, an interesting quote from the piece, quote, if impeachment seems like a fine solution to you, the good news is that Congress doesn't need evidence of actual treason or murder to move forward with an impeachment. So we've seen these established...
So she seems really fair-minded and bipartisan and balanced as well.
Whether it's the Russia collusion hoax or impeachment, these establishment figures have reared their ugly heads in an attempt to, as you say, nullify President Trump's election. And interestingly enough, and again, this is coming on the heels of the Chinese Communist Party being identified by the U.S. government as seeking to secure a Biden victory in the 2020 election. So Nils Gilman, who serves as the vice president of programs at the Berggruen Institute, this institute has not only funneled tens of millions of dollars into a host of Chinese Communist Party funded universities and institutes, but they actually house a Berggruen China Center, which collaborates with a host of state-run companies and organizations such as the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence, the China Institute for Innovation and Development Strategy. The list goes on. We'd run out of time if I kept reading the names, but even more interesting.
Well, I mean, going to develop at that point, you're probably coming onto the same thing I am.
Yeah.
I want to know why the media calls this a bipartisan group or a non-partisan group. For instance, are there media people affiliated with the Berggruen Institute?
You beat me to it. So the 21st Century Council, whose sole purpose is to, quote, thwart the anti-globalization backlash that brought nationalist and populist movements to power in major countries, not only has a host of high-level Chinese Communist Party apparatchiks on it, but also Fareed Zakaria, who, as we know, is a host on CNN. But we've talked about in previous shows how he's been a visiting fellow to Tsinghua University's School of, quote, Marxist Journalism, again, Again, that's a direct quote from the school's dean. And as we know, there's a revolving door between a host of CNN talent going on to work at Chinese state-run media and outlets such as CNN and the Washington Post, which again has a lot of columnists participating in the Transition Integrity Project. They've participated with the Chinese Communist Party whenever delegates have come overseas to attend institutes at Harvard, you name it.
We've got about a minute and a bit left here, and I just want to understand from the Republican side, why isn't more of a stink being kicked up about this? I feel like Republicans are always caught unawares, always on the back foot, always trying to play catch up. We've now provided, you have provided, in fact, I think I wrote that story. We have provided the information. We've done the legwork. We've done the digging. We've done the connecting the dots. It's all there. It's all linked. It's all cited and sourced over at the National Pulse on this Transition Integrity Project. Why aren't there Republicans out there who are raising this, who are waving the flag on this and saying, hey, they're trying to steal this election, and here is evidence?
Well, so much of the Republican Party is establishment through and through, and fundamentally the Never Trump movement is about any politician who doesn't subscribe to the establishment worldview of wanting to continue these endless foreign wars, keep our borders open, they will never be elected. So these establishment Republicans are happy to see initiatives like the Transition Integrity Project abound and operate with immunity.
Well, Natalie Winters, thank you very much for bringing us more information on that. The National Pulse will be back tomorrow here on America's Voice at 3 p.m. Make sure you're going to americasvoice.news, downloading the Pluto app, and critically going to thenationalpulse.com/support and supporting all of our work. I'm Raheem Kassam. We'll be back tomorrow. More Natalie Winters and more National Pulse. We'll see you then.